Right, so recently we've been getting tons of iPhone 15 CADs, specifically focusing on the regular sizes, but now I have details regarding the Plus and the Pro Max, so let's delve into it. So let's begin with the not so interesting CAD, which is the iPhone 15 Plus, and this basically shows everything we already expected. So for example, the dynamic island on the front, we also have slimmer bezels. Those should be similar in size to the iPhone 14 Pro bezels. We also have a slight curvature with the chassis because with the complete iPhone 15 series, Apple's making these designs a little curvier, and we also get the USB-C port. Now for those wanting the exact dimensions for the 15 Plus, it's 160.87mm for the height, 77.76mm for the width of the device, and 7.81mm for the thickness. So yeah, basically there's been a small increase in all dimensions of the device, and it's basically now on par with the 14 Pro Max. Now interestingly, unlike what was said for the 15 CADs, there is no mention of a display increase, and considering the dimensions are very similar to the 14 Pro Max, it should still be 6.7 inches. And yeah, that makes me doubtful about the 6.2 inch panel for the regular 15, because I think it's more likely they're rounding these displays up, and while there is a small display increase, the regular 15 is still going to be 6.1 inches, and the Plus is still going to be 6.7 inches. Now one interesting thing we see with the 15 Plus CADs is that the camera bump with the regular models is increasing, so that could of course be a sign we're getting better cameras, and there has been some reports that we could see the 14 Pro main lens come down to the regular 15s, and so that's now likely to be the case. Now yes, I know the 14 Pro main lens actually was not that big of an upgrade, but do remember it gave us back 2x zoom on the Pro phones, and it was optical quality, so if the regular models could gain this, that would be a big upgrade because we don't have a telephoto sensor with the regular models. It's still going to be the same diagonal dual layout, and so giving us a larger main lens that can crop in 2x and give us optical quality zoom would be nice. Now for those wondering if we're going to see bigger batteries, well, there is a thicker chassis with the 15 Plus, but it is only a small increase, and so if we do see bigger batteries, they're not going to be substantial increases. And yes, I think the Pros are the ones to get if you want the best battery life, because remember they're getting the A17 chip, it should be a lot more efficient with the 3nm process, and while yes, we have heard reports regarding displays being more efficient across the lineup, I don't think that's going to make a massive difference, whereas a brand new processor will, so yes, the 15 Pros are going to be the battery champs. And by the way, I forgot to mention this earlier, but you can see there are physical buttons on these 15 Plus CADs, and so yes, only the Pros are getting the solid state buttons. And finally, I do want to mention with these iPhone 15 Plus CADs, we do see 2.5D glass to match the slightly curvier body, and that's bad news because screen protectors are going to be harder to apply with these panels, and so that is a slight downgrade when it comes to these new designs. Now moving on to the iPhone 15 Pro Max CADs, these actually come from a different source, because yes, the three other CADs all came from 9to5Mac, but this comes from IC Universe, a pretty credible Samsung leaker, though his Apple details can be false, and so do take this with a grain of salt. However, I will say 9to5Mac Ian Zelbo does corroborate with these CADs, and so it's likely to be legit. So for the most part, the 15 Pro Max / Ultra CADs are very similar to the CADs for the iPhone 15 Pro. We have of course the cutouts for the solid state buttons. You can see the volume buttons now one piece, instead of it being two separate pieces. We also have thinner bezels, we have the slightly curvier design, and we have the Type-C port. Now moving to the back of the device, some may be surprised by the lack of a major design change, considering we've heard so much about periscope zoom lens, but it seems Apple's replacing the 3X with the new periscope zoom module, which is an interesting move because many Android phones have a standard telephoto and the periscope as a quad system setup, and so some were expecting that to be the case with the 15 Pro Max. However, I've been expecting since day one for Apple to replace the telephoto with the periscope zoom, and so I'm happy that's the case. And for those wondering, would it not be better to have a dedicated 3X? Well, remember that Apple can take data from the wide-angle lens and combine the data they get from the periscope zoom to give us much better zoom. This is what Google does with their Pixels, and Apple to an extent already does this with the 2X option on the 14 Pro, so for those wanting 3X, these cameras should still give you pretty good results. But that's not the biggest surprise with these CADs, because if you look at the camera bump, it actually protrudes less than the 14 Pro and also the 15 Pro CADs, which were absolutely ginormous. And that's surprising because you would expect the Pro Max to get the bigger camera module, but that's not the case. And Ice Universe does give us measurements for the 15 Pro Max. He says the height's going to be 159.86mm, the width of the device is going to be 76.73mm, the thickness is going to increase to 8.25mm, but the camera thickness is going to reduce, it's now 3.59mm, and so the overall thickness of the device is also less at 11.84mm. Now initially I was pretty confused by this. Why would the 15 Pro Max have a more flush camera bump? But then I realized periscope zoom modules are always stacked vertically in the device, and so it makes sense why the actual body's increasing but the bump has now decreased. Because yes, there is a 0.4mm increase in the actual body of the device, and so I'm assuming most of that is because of the periscope zoom module inside, and hopefully that does also allow for a bigger battery inside. That would be pretty nice. And yeah, honestly, I'm kinda waiting for the day we see 5,000 mAh in an iPhone, because large Android phones have offered this for years, and yet the iPhone still matches their battery life, or sometimes exceeds it, with a much smaller battery inside. And so if Apple can match the capacity of those phones, while giving us the much more efficient A17 chip, that could give us ludicrous battery life. Anyways, because we're seeing thinner bezels with the 15 Pro series, the height and the width of the device has reduced, and that's fantastic news because the 14 Pro Max can be a handful. It's pretty wide especially, so reducing the dimensions ever so slightly along with, of course, the more rounded body should give us a more comfortable experience. And remember, on top of this, we're seeing titanium with the 15 Pros, so that should also decrease the weight. So yeah, that's the big aspect I'm looking forward to, because the 15 Pro Max definitely needs a weight and a slight size reduction. And by the way, as I mentioned for the 15 Plus CADs and all the other iPhone 15 CADs, we do see 2.5D glass. Oh, and actually forgot to mention this earlier, but you can see the actual mute switch on the side of the device is a lot more compact, and it seems that might also be replaced by haptics. I'm not exactly sure how that's going to work. Maybe long press on the side of the device to mute it, short press to switch on ringer modes. But yeah, that's something I thought I'd mention. Anyways, that's about it, guys. Tell me your thoughts regarding this report in the comments. Anyways, thank you for watching, guys. Make sure to like and subscribe for the latest Apple news and rumors. And on that note, I'll see you guys in the next one.